Hi, everybody. Good evening. One sec while I just set myself up here. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for
Hello,
coming.
Marisa.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can. Okay, good.
Yes.
Good. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's nice to see you all again. We've had a lot of events recently, online and in person. And I have to say, it's been so refreshing and heartening to just be with you all in community, whether that's been virtual or in person. Last week, we were thrilled to host an in-person reception for members jury 2. I'm sure some of you were there. And it was really special. It was special to feel Concord Art buzzing with that creative energy, again, that we've been missing while we've been isolating these past few years. In each of the past events we've hosted, we've taken some time to hold space for the emotional complexity of the current state of our world, and tonight is no different. So I just want to take a moment to recognize that despite the challenges that we've all been facing while we're navigating a war and this loss and anxiety and uncertainty about the future, I really do hope that joining together tonight, even though it's in a virtual way instead of in person, that we can find some small moments of peace and gain a little bit of emotional and mental, recharge to finish off the week and the weekend. So I'm really happy to have you all with us. I'll offer 3 quick housekeeping notes before we really get rolling with the program. First, you might have seen it in the slideshow, but on Monday we are hosting the Kroll Senior Curator of American Paintings from the MFA, Erica Hirschler, is going to be giving a lecture on Zoom at 6 p.m. That's this Monday, the 21st. She'll be presenting her lecture Studios of Their Own, Women Artists of Boston from 1880 to 1940. Our very own founder, Elizabeth Wentworth Roberts, will be highlighted in that presentation, along with her female contemporaries. Additionally, one of our speakers tonight, Matt Brown, is offering a 3-day workshop later this spring. So if you find yourself moved or inspired or interested in what you hear tonight, you might consider signing up for that workshop to continue digging into study with Matt. You can find information.
Marisa, I think we also have a workshop scheduled for April 9th.
We do, but it's full. It's actually already sold out. So you could put yourself on the wait list for that if you're eager, but if not, you can join for the 3-day. I think it's in May. But you can find both on the website, and you can contact Lisa Pohl for more information if you have questions or want to learn more. And what else? One last thing. Yeah, so throughout the night, as always, you can use the chat to ask questions or make comments or respond to what you're seeing and hearing. As always, we'll try to field anything that feels really immediate and needs to be addressed in the moment. Otherwise, we're going to hold those questions until Q&A at the end, and we'll have a discussion. So stick around for that. And finally, I would like to offer a brief introduction of our speakers for the evening. Matt Brown is an accomplished artist working in the style of Japanese woodblock prints in printmaking. He was born right here in Boston, Massachusetts, and Matt worked as a cabinet maker, a carpenter, and a builder, and he began making color prints in the Japanese method in 1993 and has been making them ever since. Matt is known for his dynamic, color-saturated prints of nature, cities, architecture, and even the occasional ball game. Professor Ming Meng is a professor of cognitive neuroscience and received his Ph.D. from Princeton University. He was a postdoctoral fellow at MIT and a faculty member at Dartmouth College. Professor Meng is currently a full-time professor at the South China Normal University. As an artist myself, I will not try to explain Professor Meng's neuroscience work, but I'm sure he will do a great job of it tonight. I'll leave that to him, but I'm thrilled to have Matt and Ming here with us for the energy theory of color. So welcome to you both. I will turn it over to you.
All right, so Marisa, I'm a little older than Ming, so I get to start first. Um, and might actually mention our basic schedule, which is we actually have in mind 2 Q&A moments. So we're each going to share a little bit more bio, although thank you for the introduction, Marisa. I could see that I can cut what I'm going to say in half. You've already mentioned. And then we're going to each share a PowerPoint slideshow, more or less 2 different voices, the artist and the scientist, sharing well, results of conversations that go back to, we first met in 2018. We got onto the energy theory of color idea in the spring of 2020 when the COVID was getting going. At any rate, we're thinking that takes us about halfway through our session of a little under an hour and a half. And then we're imagining if there's some neat chat questions, Marisa shares some of them when we've got maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And Ming and I want to, towards the end of our time together, each share, we're working on a little booklet introduction to our idea. We're calling it the playbill. And Ming would share and I would share, and we would have Q&A after that, which would take us to our close time of 8 o'clock. Although Marisa has said it's not going to be a kill time. We can, if we go till 5 past 8, it might be okay. My little bio intro, I'm going to share in the form of, so am I set up that I can do a screen share here? I see.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, it just helped me to talk my way through it. And there's a little bit of imagery. Let's see if I can get it going here. Yeah. Okay. So. Whoop, that's not right. I've got, hang on a second here. I'll go back here. All right. So this is just a little timeline I can skip across, but there is a little moment. I took a class in 1979 with a fellow, Georgie Kepish, was a professor. He was retired, but he came back out of retirement. And he was a fellow who really liked conversation of artists and scientists. And that really, in some ways, is seeds of my interest in the conversation between art and science. As Marisa explained, I, after graduating college, worked in the building trades until 1993. Got onto, it was an exhibit of Hiroshige prints at nearby Dartmouth Hood Museum that inspired me to get into experiments of color woodblock printing, and that became my full-time work. In 2017, I took over a little retail space, art and craft retail space in Lyme, Matt Brown Fine Art. And then in 2018, in the wee hours of a January morning, I remember it was like maybe 4 in the morning, and Ming and his family showed up at my house, and maybe not that many days later was our first conversation up in my shop where I print about the nature of how we see color. And that's what really leads to where we are this evening. They came again the following winter. We had Ming give a talk at the gallery, which was great. They came again in January of 2020, and they ended up staying, which is a COVID development. They stayed in the house, and meanwhile, Ming and our conversations deepened. And at some point, I shared this concept that actually I coined it many years earlier, the energy theory of color. And this slide here shows a page from a sketchbook of, what does it say, 1983 or such. And I'm just going to read you what I wrote in that sketchbook way back then. In the colors, it's not the colors themselves, it is the relationship between them. in parentheses, I wrote energy theory of color. I must have at that time had it as a term for myself. It is the varied energies of the colors and their relationships that is the thing. Well, I was drawing, that little sketch was a drawing of a colored sculpture that they would have had at the Harvard's Carpenter Center where I had been undergraduate. This is a photo of one of Le Corbusier's. He was the architect of that art center. This is a photo of one of his sculptures, and it's that polychromed sculpture that I was thinking of. Here's a photo of the building where I studied, and it's a pretty interesting building, and it moves, and that is in the long and short of it is kind of what I'm about with my work. This shows a woodblock print that my grandmother had. I would have seen it as a kid. Notice the curves and shapes and relationships. I see connections between that image and that building we just saw, and it all leads to my activity here, the sort of dynamic activity of making woodblock prints where you print by hand rubbed each impression, and that concludes my little bio introduction. And I want to hand this off to Ming. How do I stop my screen share though? Are you able to do it from your end, Marisa?
But if you
Uh,
mouse up to that little green bar.
There we go. Okay.
okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Marisa and Matt, for the introduction. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to talk about our project and perhaps get to know so many of you from art background. So like Matt introduced, when he and I met, and he mentioned to me the energy theory of color. The energy theory of color, these three words together just made me exciting. And so, but from a scientific background, I keep thinking, what is it, right? So the three words together. So we had conversations and more conversations a year later when I came back for winter vacation, and even further, I came back in 2020 when we had the COVID situation going on. Then I stayed in New Hampshire for over half a year. It was meant to be a short winter vacation, but became a really long time. Meanwhile, it's a time we had more conversations, and so I keep thinking about these three words together. So here are my further thinking of this color theory, energy theory of color. So this is actually a picture of Guangzhou where I work now. So I'm currently in New Hampshire, in Lyme, New Hampshire, but I actually work for South China Normal University, and this is it's very different from New Hampshire. It's a pretty big city, and it's in the south, so gets rain a lot, and it's also a city of flower because it's subtropical. It never snows. But it rains a lot, so we got to see rainbows, right? So when we talk about color, I guess rainbow it might be a good example, and so we see here in the rainbow over the skyline of Guangzhou, it's you see colors, right? So, but what is color, right? So actually, how many colors in a rainbow? So because Newton first used the prism glass and demonstrate sunlight can, like white light can be break into rainbow. And he coined like 7 colors for the rainbow. Right? But we know from science, it's actually it's a continuous, it's a continuum of wavelength, right? So there are actually numerous colors in the rainbow, different shades of different colors, because wavelength can change through a continuum, right? But because in Newton's language, he described it as 7 colors, and now we pretty much everyone will say, oh, they are. If we ask our kids how many colors in a rainbow, they'll say 7 colors, right? So, so I think that color is that reflects something. So color is not just physics, not just wavelength. It's actually what's in our mind, right? So if it's just wavelength, we'll say there are numerous colors in the rainbow, but in our mind, color in a rainbow, we categorize them to 7 colors. Here is another example from psychological textbook. Actually, some psychological textbook. If you take a closer look, right? So at the glance, you probably see on the left a white moon, on the right a black moon, right? But if we take a closer look, these 2 circles are identical, right? So if you take a close up, here is black, right? Here is also black. Here is whitish, cloudy, whitish, and here is also whitish, cloudy. So color is not. So here's luminance is one feature of color, right? So broadly defined is also the luminance of color. So if you think carefully, it's not physics. Right? So what we see white and black is not just physics, because physically they are the same. These 2 circles are the same, but we, in our mind, this is white, this is black, right? So because the relations, if you see the context, right? So here is darker than this side, right? The left side is darker than the right side. So because of the relationships in our mind, despite these 2 physically are identical, we define different color. We attribute different colors to this as white and this as black. And another example, many of you probably have seen this demonstration through the internet a few years ago. So what do you see? What color do you see? Let me ask. Do you see a blue dress or white, gold?
I see blue.
Yeah. White, I'm seeing blue.
Yeah. Anyone see different?
I see stripes, blue and gold.
Blue and gold. Yeah. Okay.
Do people see stripes?
Yes, stripes. Yeah. I think people will see stripes. But people may have different opinions on whether they see gold and white versus blue and black.
Yeah, there are a couple people in the chat saying that they do see the gold and white.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this suggests we have different opinions on color, right? So it's a color that so color is a so what is color is it's not wavelength, it's not physics, because physics should be the same for everyone, right? So color is private. It's in every individual's mind. So you may have different opinion. So color is more like an opinion. Yeah, you may have a different opinion than someone sit next to you, right? So, and the reason for that is what we call actually color constancy in psychological research. It's so because what we see with color is not only the luminance or the wavelength of the lights, but also how we interpret the material of the dress is with a high reflective rate of the light or low reflective rate of the light. So if the material of the cloth is light colored, then in a shadow. So if we interpret this picture having light source from the back, so let's say this is the main light source of this picture when this picture was taken, and then because the dress will be in a shadow, but we still see this amount of light, indicating the cloth is having a pretty high reflective rate. So it must be light colored dress. Whereas some might imagine there's some light from the front directly shine, which is not in the picture, but still directly shine on the dress. So with direct light, we still get this amount of reflection, indicating the material of this cloth is dark color. So therefore, like the one weared on this model, we see lights on her face is direct, and then this dress must be a dark color dress. So more likely, you will say is black and blue. Right? So so that indicates we are not just we're seeing color not only because of the lights projected to our retina, to our eyes, but also because our brain worked differently to make sense of the information projected to our eyes. And so I further argue the brain is actively working to generate, to interpret what's the information presented to our eyes, right? So we know the brain is the CPU, right? Eye is just like a camera, right? So, but the brain is the CPU to process, to make us understand what is color. So, so here are some examples, like of the brain actively process information. So, so we all see this probably as a rotating globe, right? So it's, but actually think about it. It's actually on your screen, right? So you're most likely you're having a flat screen, right? So your screen is 2D, but we are perceiving 3D and rotating globe. And some of you probably see the globe rotating clockwise. Some of you probably see it rotating counterclockwise. Right? And you can actually try, some of you probably can even try to make it flip. Right? If it's rotating towards the right, and blink your eyes, and you'll see your mind's, you'll see your will to switch it to make it switch to left. Some of you probably can do that. Not everyone can do that. But it's a demonstration indicating you could let it go either way, because real information here, what's physically available here is actually 2D information, but our brain interpreted it as 3D. So the brain reconstructed 3D from 2D information. And because we reconstructed those information, we could reconstruct it either way, either from left to right or from right to left, right? So to make it, so we could use our brain to make it rotating clockwise or counterclockwise. So the brain is constructing something, right? So it's the same reason we may see this dancer. This is probably more famous because this also has gone viral on the internet a few years ago. So many see this dancer rotating clockwise, and about as many will see this dancer rotating counterclockwise, right? But actually, it could go either way. Right? So if you look at the one on the left, right? So the dancer in the center will probably rotate in the same direction as the one on the left. But I'm not changing slide. If you are looking, pay attention to the dancer on the right, you'll probably see the center dancer rotating counterclockwise. The center dancer is not changing, right? So it's still the same dancer, but depends on whether you attend to the left or attend to the right, you can make it switch. That's because we had some physical cues disambiguated the rotating direction. And so if you look closer, the blue and red lines on the left is different from the blue and red lines on the right. So provided some occlusion cues that's more than just simple 2D information. So so this is just another example. So because with only this figure, it's difficult to make it switch and back and forth. But our brain has the capacity to make it rotating differently. And this is just one of many examples in like psychology textbook, perhaps, right? So because like this cube, right? So even though it's showing on your screen, on your 2D screen, but our brain will think this is a 3D cube, right? So, and because it's physically 2D, but our brain constructed it as a 3D, so we could either construct it as like this surface in front of this surface, or if you look here, you may see this surface in front of this surface, right? So it could be a cube either sticking out towards the left or sticking out towards the right, and this one too, right? So the picture is static, right? So I'm not making any magic of changing slides, but it's only in your mind, right? So you can see either as a duck, right? So this is the beak of the duck, or maybe this is ears. These are ears of a bunny, right? So it's either a duck or a bunny, right? So it depends on how your brain want to think about it. So again, indicating our brain have to work. Our brain has to actively work to interpret the information projected to our eyes. So we have to use energy to interpret information, no matter its color or just black and white shapes. So specifically about colors, like how we actively see colors. Here is another example. If you it may take a couple of minutes, but you have to be a little patient with me. So if you stare at the cross, do not move your eyes for just a few, perhaps like half minutes. Do you see colors disappearing? It's very important you stare at the cross and do not move your eyes. Right. Most people will see color disappearing. Why? We think it's because when you're not moving your eyes, right? So you keep the information presented to your eyes still. Right? And when then the color will fade away. This is called Troxler fading, by the way, because Troxler is the first person discovered this, or at least demonstrated this, written it down in your book. So, and we, like I just said, our brain needs to be active to see colors. So our brain needs to have our eyes moving a little bit, like slightly, for us to allowing us to see things. So, in fact, our eyes move constantly. So even you don't feel your eyes are moving. It's actually moving. Sometimes it's quite small, but our brain is actually using energy, like make our eyes move in order for us to see. So here is another demonstration showing our eyes are actually moving all the time, right? So here it's actually a static picture again. Nothing is really physically moving. So if you look at a certain spot, it's not moving, but you feel it's moving because you make small eye movements, and these small eye movements makes you feel, oh, this is a floating heart that's moving relative to the background. So why do our brain work this way, right? So why do we want to see colors this way? This is actually how psychologists would interpret. We see things. Our brain is for us to understand what's going to happen in the future. So the brain is actually an inference machine. So we're not passively receiving information, but on top of that, we try to predict what's going on in the future. So here's a tennis player, a professional tennis player, right? Playing tennis. So some of you probably play tennis as well, know this guy, right? So we know tennis, in a professional tennis game, the tennis ball moves really fast, really, really fast. So, and this is a picture taken when the tennis ball is flying. But look at his eyes. His eyes is focusing on the tennis ball. That indicates it's not possible. He see the ball is here and then moves his eyes to this location. So in other words, if he see the tennis ball here and move his eyes to this location, and then when he moves his eyes to this location, because the tennis ball is flying very quickly, the tennis ball probably should move to here. The reason he can focus his eyes to the location of this tennis ball at this location means before the tennis ball moved to here, he already expected the tennis ball will move to here, and his eyes are focusing on here, waiting for the tennis ball move to here, so he can hit the ball accurately. Because keep in mind, this tennis ball is moving with very fast speed. So he's predicting where the tennis ball is going to fly. And a good professional tennis ball player is not relying on seeing the tennis ball, the flying trajectory of the tennis ball to predict where the tennis ball is going to be. They are actually having a mind game. They're looking at their opponents to predict where the opponent is going to hit the ball, where in which direction his opponent will hit the ball too, so he can have some advantage in time to wait at that location to hit the ball back. So here we use our brain not only as a inference machine to predict where the ball is going to fly to, but also infer about how his opponent is going to hit the ball to which direction. So in other words, we use our brain to simulate another person's brain to understand what's going on and to predict what will be going on. Right? And this is actually further supported by evidence from neuroscience. Neuroscientists actually find in our brains, as well as primates' brain and children's brain, we have some mirror neurons. So many of you probably have children. You see them there. They like to, one thing quite common for kids, for toddlers, they like to play with your cell phones, right? With your, so the reason they like to play, it's not because, it's perhaps not only because the cell phones look fancy, they're colorful, because like from my own experience, for example, I bought some like telephone toys. Those telephone toys are much more colorful, much more fun. They have music and can play games on those toy phones, right? But my kids always try to grab my phone instead of playing their own toy phones which is designed for them to play, right? So they really like real phones, because kids tend to imitate what adults do, right? So it's actually quite universal. The same goes to non-human primates, like monkeys. You probably, if you go to zoo, you probably see monkeys sometimes simulates how other people do, right? So if you open your mouth, and sometimes monkeys will do the same to you. So it's actually mirror neurons in their brain trying to learn how other people behave, and they'll behave in a similar way. And we have evidence indicating those, for example, pianists, when they hear a piano music, their motor neurons will activate, even though they're not playing. But when they hear other people playing a piano piece, they're thinking themselves playing piano. Whereas non-musician, if you don't play piano, when you hear other people playing piano, your motor neuron will not activate. You only have your auditory neuron activated. So this is how we perceive things, right? So if you think back, why we want to why we need seeing color, why we actually need to see anything, is because we are animals, right? We are basically animals, and animals can see, because seeing is for action, right? Perception is for action. Evolutionary, for animals, we are capable of interacting with the external world, with the physical external world, and the physical external world is constantly changing. It's dynamic, right? So in order during the evolution, in order to survive better in this dynamically changing world, we have to predict what's going to happen the next, right? So we use actions as animal. We use actions to interact with the external world, and so we can, if we could predict what will happen the next, we can interact with the external world better. So that's why we say perception is for action, and humans are social animals, right? So in order to interact, so often our interactions with the external world involves interaction with other people, and our interaction with other people would be require our ability to think in other people's mind, to think in other people's shoes, right? So that's what we say theory of mind. We use our brain to simulate another person's brain and predict how the other person will respond to my action. So that's mirror neurons. And then goes back to arts, right? Goes back to colors. Right? So or goes back to it. Let's come back to energy theory of color. Right? So if you look at this kid's drawing of hummingbird, what do you see? It's a hummingbird, right? But
bird and a flower,
yeah,
and a blue sky.
Right. Yeah. So first of all, again, this is a static picture, right? So nothing is physically moving on your screen, but you see a hummingbird flying, right? So you see motion here. You see the bird is flying, right? So this is what we call implied motion, because it's not physically moving, but we got the energy of the bird flying. Right? And you probably also see this bird is flying in a sunny summer day, and perhaps you'll even feel the breeze of a nice summer day, just like today, almost summer in New Hampshire, a very nice, pretty day, warm day. So you actually see summer in this picture, right? Even though it's just the kids' joy, right? So you see summer. You see maybe the kids who draw this picture is enjoying the summer, right? It's having some fun here, because you simulate, you use your brain to as an inference machine, like what we normally use in the theory of mind. Use your brain to simulate what's the artist, or maybe even a kid who made this drawing. Right? So you think, oh, the person draw this picture might be thinking of summer. So because you had the experience of seeing a hummingbird flying in a sunny summer day. And this is the same, actually goes back tens of thousands of years ago. And this is where arguably I would say where art began, right? So tens of thousands of years ago, in cave paintings, right? People that long time ago already paint in many ways we can share with with their knowledge that we can share with. Right? So for example, you can see this author, whoever painted this cave painting, right? So have some understanding of the muscle lines. So this is again a static picture, right? But none of this is physically moving, but we see motion here, we see energy here, we see muscles here, right? So the person who painted this actually have some anatomy knowledge of the muscles of this beast, right? So this is very strong and powerful beast, right? So and this understanding is as some as artists nowadays we also understand, right? So in order to draw a good picture of the beast, we should know how the buffalo moves, right? how its muscle is shaped, and so this is not just a picture taken. If it's just a picture taken, you probably won't see this line, right? This is a line not physically presenting, because the body, the surface body of a buffalo shouldn't look like this way. It's because we understand the muscles, like the segregation between legs and body. We will draw this, right? So we understand in some way. We understand what was the artist who made this cave painting was thinking, right? So we partially because we used our theory of mind, and then why is that, right? So that's because we live in a we share some experience. We all live in a universe that has some fundamental basic principles. Right? No matter the kids who drew this, or someone 10,000 years ago who painted this. We live in a universe that has some common physical principles, right? One of it is energy. The energy principles is so fundamental in our physical world. Right? So we know energy, not necessarily the equations, the physical equations, but we know energy, right? We know gravity, right? So even though like before Newton, we don't know the equation of gravity, but we know we will know there is gravity. We know apples will fall from the tree, right? So everyone feel energy, feel gravity, right? So and artists actually when they make paintings, they use this analogy. And as observers, when we appreciate art pieces, we also use those knowledge to understand the artist, understand the color. So for interim conclusions, I think what I'm trying to argue is that the brain is an inference machine. We actively see colors, and people may see colors differently because we have different brains, right? So we may see colors differently. But no matter how different we are from each other, we all follow some universal principles, right? So after all, we're all humans who live on this earth, right? So through perhaps energy lines, we see colors and create colors as like energy as a universal principle that governs how this world is working. So I think the purpose of the project Matt and I are working on is actually we try to we'll utilize energy yardstick to organize and understand principles of color perception and applying an relationship of energy relationship to describe how a brain discern, organize, enjoy, and create the color world. So thank you, and move this to Matt and let he continue with his aspect. Right. I'll switch the screen to Matt. Sorry, I probably took longer than scheduled.
Oh, that's fine, Ming. I'll move it right along if I can find my way here. We left off here. I'm just going to move a little bit quickly through how I make these woodblock prints. Ming, that was great. And your description of the cave painting, it kind of resonates with this sort of basic form making instinct that we have. There's something about it when we make imagery, it changes the way we see our world. And when I got onto this woodblock process, that changed. I could literally see how I could experience how it changed the world that I saw. I live in a woodblock world where there's clear shapes, carved shapes, and this is just a quick little tour through my little woodblock world, which, as Ming described, we work with this business of these mirror neurons that lead to this idea of theory of mind. We empathize with, I empathize with this world that's created by these carved wood blocks. And It starts often with a drawing, but it breathes greater life when colors go in, the multiple blocks of the colors. And one way that it really gains life is when I teach. And here are slides showing these two photos are from classes right there at the studio at Concord Art, where I've taught. I think it goes back 20 years or so. And here is some imagery. Those two prints were made right there in the studio at the Concord Art Association. And there are, I think, energy principles at work in both of them. But I'm going to move right along to this print image, which was made in a class some years ago. I see 2005. And postulate that if we use that energy yardstick that Ming was speaking about, we can get a feeling for the energy of the carved shapes juxtaposed with these blocks of color. And as I thought about the theory and the theory in practice, I would say that the organization of the colors in this color woodblock print help a great deal in our perception, our enjoyment of this image, because the colors are well organized. There's a central, these little shapes of burnt sienna stand out way over on one side, and the rest of the colors are all of a kind of a similar energy. They're greens and blues and grays. And if you just think about the colors, it feels it's easy to read. If you look at the marks, it's way more even frenetic. And it's this energy yardstick that helps me to see why this, I think, is an interesting and beautiful image. Here's another print made in the class. I think I'll skip past it. I wrote a little bit here about that sailboat on that depicted landscape in this image, and it's my idea, or Ming and I haven't focused on this image together, but those little orange yellow shapes in the sky, they lend a feeling of potential energy, that maybe there's a storm coming or such in this image. This is a print that got made. A woman took my class, I see, in 2016. And I remember, you know, and this is before I met Ming, so I didn't have the science. I was just groping. But I remember sharing with her, you know, sort of using the energy term, and out of it, she got the idea of how to put those two little strong burnt sienna squares in the lower right of this image. And the idea being that most of the colors are muted and of a kind of, they're one part of the energy spectrum, if you think of that rainbow. And then out here are those little brown squares. All right, here we've moved on to, so Joseph Albers is somebody that Ming and I have spoken of and referred to, and Ming shared that we don't see color in any absolute sense. That picture of the dress describes it, and similarly, Albers really shows it graphically. The two squares, the brown squares, are actually just like that image that Ming opened up with the two moons that were the same, but we see one as dark and one as light. Similarly, the way we see color is entirely in relationship to other colors. And it's part of our theory that it's the relative energies of the colors that are relevant in how we see them. There's an effect sort of like the Troxler, the Gelb effect, where the perception of darks and lights, Ming's image of the moons was demonstrating the same thing, so I'll skip right along past it. But that also, we see dark and light in relative terms. These are two images that I remember back when we were Zooming and kind of getting formative about our theory in the spring of 2020. And I remember focusing on these two images and talking about not only the energy of the colors, but the energy of the shapes. And I think we found that using kind of energy analogies and terms of warm and cool and the energies of the curves. I mean, one little thing you might notice is these are very different artists going at things in very different ways, but notice the little curves in the Da Vinci landscape on the right and the curves in the Munch landscape on the left. They're kind of related. It's fun to think of them from with using an energy lens. This is kind of just a graphic. I mean, Marisa started our time with reflection about challenges and stresses in our world right now. It's amazing. We can, you know, most of us wouldn't believe what what now we read daily on the news and whatnot. To escape to thoughts about the essential nature of vision and the energy theory of color, it's a nice escape. And sometimes ideas occur to me, and one occurred to me as I sat waiting for the sign to turn during road construction, and notice it's not unlike the blue dress, the colors of the sign actually in those photographs were not really seen, but we see them as the same color by that principle of color constancy. Our minds build our idea about what are the colors that we're looking at. Here's a little bit of energy theory in action. On the left, colors that are meant to convey a high carbohydrate, energetic food source. And on the right, a cooler, calmer energy using greens and blues and so on. And here's my last slide, which is I have a side interest in the color woodblock prints of a contemporary of Hiroshige. I showed you that original inspiration for me was Hiroshige prints. He was friends and a colleague of another artist, Utagawa Kunisada. And here's an image depicting image making. He's got an actor, Danjuro VIII, painting on a screen. And I think it's interesting that he's established this border and the screen is monochromatic, but the depicted world here, these three actors, is such a rich and colorful world of, he seemed, I think, to really understand the exciting visual impact of using contrasting energies. And here we have a lot of primaries, yellows and reds and white in a blue ground. I tend to see it through this energy lens, and Ming's descriptions of the science have increased my my enjoyment of that. Let's see, now I'm going to try to escape from the screen share and take a look at our time. So we have about a half an hour left in our time. And let's see, Marisa, do we have some questions that we ought to jump at before we get into, to dial back a little bit? I hope you guys have gotten a sense of the back and forth that Ming and I have enjoyed over, it's actually now, I think we're in our 5th year, Ming.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
And in part, we've thought, wow, this is so fun and we're learning so much. We need to keep challenging ourselves. We need to stay active and involved in our thinking. And so we've taken on the project that we're hoping to make a little booklet. We think it may go on. We think our interactions as artists and scientists are interesting enough that it merits more work. This evening with you all is part of that effort. But we're curious for feedback, and we actually want to do a short little time before 8 presenting a bit more some sort of written out verbiage of theory, and I think Ming wants to show a little bit of our outline of what we call the playbill. Marisa, is there anything that grabs out in the chat that we might address for a moment?
Yeah, there were a couple of questions that I think would be good to look at right now. So the first one was thinking about the rainbow and the way that the color spectrum is kind of relatively infinite.
Yeah.
The question was, how can that spectrum be represented in a color wheel, and how do those two ends join?
I see.
The spectrum is so broad.
I see. So
Actually,
yeah,
that wasn't the question. I'm sorry.
yeah.
The question, that was Gabrielle's question, right?
Go ahead.
The linear spectrum, right, is how we have in our physical world colors, right? Well, then we can also fashion them into the color wheel. So what's always mystified me is how the ends of the spectrum match so perfectly when they're joined in the color wheel. How is it that that happens? That's kind of
Right. So so I guess that's because how we define the color wheel, right? So it has to join. So the spectrum, the linear spectrum we had in the rainbow example is only having one dimension. So because when we define color wheel, we use like hues, right, and saturation. So actually physically when we define color, it's a hue, saturation, and luminance, right? So that it's actually 3-dimension. Whereas in the rainbow example, it's just a wavelength. It's just hue. But in color wheel, it's at least 2-dimension. I'm not expert for color wheel, so my understanding color wheel is at least 2 dimensions, so you can meet wavelength difference can meet at the ends, right? So it's like
infrared. There's infrared on one end, and then there's ultraviolet on the other end, right? And
so that's hue, right? So that's wavelength. Whereas,
I just find it kind of miraculous that they happen to meet so that visually it's contiguous.
Yeah. So because I think color wheel has both hue information and saturation information. So saturation can meet at the end. Whereas for rainbow, it's just hue. And hue is just wavelengths. Wavelengths won't. So like blue and red, they cannot meet unless if you have them both fully saturated, then they'll meet.
Gabrielle, I might jump in, and I see a question. I would love if you could talk about how you apply this theory in your artwork. And I would say that I enjoy color wheel, I enjoy color theory, but I get this strong feeling, oh, this is too complicated. And if I think of the that rainbow spectrum and that idea of the energy, that the light of the visible spectrum is actually just a piece of this wide range of varied energies, it gets simpler. I don't know how to say it other than if I'm mixing colors, if I'm juxtaposing colors, if I'm thinking of colors, it gets simpler for me to think about them in terms of energies. There's a question here from Christine. How does color energy relate to feelings? Hot red, cool blue, feeling blue, red jealousy. And I find that is a good way to think of it. It just seems simpler to think of it in terms of energies rather than an abstract concept. There are many different color wheels that I've seen, and different ways of talking about color. I don't know if this is helpful or useful. There's a question, what about double rainbows? Isn't that where the color wheel meets as one rainbow moves to the other? There was one moment I'd love to share that Ming presented something more or less related to the rainbow. And he mentioned it more when he was introducing that first slide to do with the rainbow. He was making an analogy with sound. And he said, actually, in our perception of pitch, there's actually really an infinite continuum of pitch, just as there's really an infinity of colors in that rainbow. But our brains want to organize our world, want to make sense of our world. And so we innately organize both sound and color into distinct hues and distinct pitches. We build musical scales. Am I right, Ming? Am I doing okay quoting you?
So there's one more question, and then I think we should move into your final presentation so we have time for everything, and then we can discuss more at the end. But this is actually a nice question. It might be a nice segue. So when an artist and a scientist say energy, can you define what the word means?
I'm tempted, Ming, to use that as a segue to jump into my little written piece, because it hits that. What do you think? Should we do that, or?
Yeah. So Meta and I actually debated a lot. That's a very good question. Right? That's one thing we actually discussed a lot. All right. So what do you mean by energy from an artist's point of view, right? Because scientifically, energy has of course a very strict definition. So we have in physics we have equations to describe what's energy. But Matt eventually convinced me we're actually using energy lens as a sticky art, right? To summarize the general principle behind how he actually used this energy theory to make his own arts, and how he see other people's arts. So I kind of share his definition on that. So so I think it would be a good idea if you could present your.
Let's jump right in on it.
Yeah, and then people will understand. Right. Yeah, the audience probably can understand better what do you mean by energy.
All right. Well, we'll try it. All right. So it's a screen. I'm going to do it as a screen share. And so more or less, this is a piece that I've written out. And you can follow along with me. It'll begin this way. Towards the conclusion of his book, Optics, near the end of its final section, Isaac Newton, while expounding on aspects of his laws of motion, wrote, "Seeing, therefore, the variety of motion which we find in the world is always decreasing, there's a necessity of conserving and recruiting it by active principles, such as are the cause of gravity, by which planets and comets keep their motions in their orbs, and bodies acquire great motion in falling, and the cause of fermentation, by which the heart and blood of animals are kept in perpetual motion and heat. The inward parts of the earth are constantly warmed, and in some places grow very hot. Bodies burn and shine, mountains take fire, the caverns of the earth are blown up, and the sun continues violently hot and lucid, and warms all things by its light. For we meet with very little motion in the world besides what is owing to these active principles. And if it were not for these principles, the bodies of the earth, planets, comets, sun, and all things in them would grow cold and freeze and become inactive masses, and all putrefaction, generation, vegetation, and life would cease, and the planets and comets would not remain in their orbs." All right, so is Newton not describing the endless energy transformation nature of our world and universe? Isn't he describing an experience of the world shaped driven and kept in motion by energy. Energy is the ability to do work. Work is that which affects change. As we interact with all this energy transforming change, our brain uses our senses to follow, predict, and ascertain these changes in our world. This is what Ming was describing to us. He said, we've got our vision and we use our brains to interact actively with our world. Ming has described how this works in his description of a simple example with touch. When we first put a hat on our head, we feel that hat. Soon, however, we no longer feel the hat on our head. But if something changes, if someone grabs from behind that hat, our sensation of the hat or the lack of it returns. Things are similar with visual perception. Our vision is pitched to seek out dynamics, things that move, patterns of darks and lights that appear in dynamic relationship, and dominant contours where edges meet, images that represent things that have happened or are happening or about to happen. If we look at things that are static, such as pictures, we pursue mental pathways. This is following Ming's theory of mind. We empathize with things that have, he showed it with that hummingbird. Even though it's a simple static image, we can still, we imagine that hummingbird hovering in the air over that flower. This energy theory of ours is similarly an active attempt to interact with something dynamic, our visualizing minds. Our idea, visualizing brains, evolved to seek out and assess energy relationships. At first, the ancestor of the eye would have been light-sensitive nerve tissue, able to discern differences between light and dark. Through millions of years, vision evolved into something more complex. Insects developed multiple eyes to be able to discern movement. Butterflies developed rich color perception to be able to seek out flowers. All the while, vision remained active. The Troxler effect that we did is an example of how our perception of color is built on active dynamic participation to be able to see color. If we still our eyes, as we did with the screen when Ming showed it, the colors disappear. In his foreword to a 1931 edition of Newton's Optics, Albert Einstein described Isaac Newton's approach. And this is what Einstein wrote. It's a short little foreword that they put in this edition that I have. The conceptions that Newton used to reduce the material of experience to order seem to flow spontaneously from experience itself, from the beautiful experiments which he ranged in order like playthings and describes with an affectionate wealth of detail. In one person, Newton combined the experimenter, the theorist, the mechanic, and not least the artist in exposition. So here's the idea. We'll see what Ming thinks of this. Reducing the material of experience to order. You can imagine that Einstein is describing not only Newton's conceptions, all of us are trying to bring order to the material of experience. Ming has described it. Our minds are inference engines. We conjecture things about our world. We come up with theories to explain what we think we are seeing. We use experiment and investigation through our senses to build in our minds mental images of our world. Faced with color mixing challenges when I'm making my woodblock prints, my go-to yardstick is the energy theory of color. I keep my focus on my experience of what I intuit are energy relationships between the colors. I find this approach simplifies colors can get pretty complicated. And I've used this as my yardstick. I think in terms, I say, go to the energy relationships of the colors. Sounds handy, but how, why does it work? Our brains use the concepts of color to help organize our world. Colors work not only to tell us which subway line to use, what flag to rally around, or how we feel about the entry door to our house. Color perception is an adaptation helping us to see spatial relationships, find ripe apples on a tree, or come to a stop at an intersection. It's accepted that colors are not intrinsic to light. Colors are a sensation in our minds, catalyzed through the perception of light of varying frequencies. I think you heard this Ming make this idea. And I'm going to skip along a little bit here because there's language here that, not all animals see color. A lot are just seeing maybe a black and white world and such. But here's the last little image that we've struggled with, and it's quite interesting. There's evidence that in ancient times, people didn't see blue. They had no word for blue. They didn't have blue pigments, and they wore no blue togas or dresses. They likely had no conscious perceptions of blue in their world. But ancient people still could look up and see the sky. So what did they see? It's part of our energy lens idea that as there's nothing absolute about color, and that as we experience color primarily in relationship, those ancients still would have been aware when the sky was darker than, for instance, distant sunlit trees. They would have noticed a moon in an afternoon sky appearing lighter, mostly white, against its surrounding sky. It's part of idea that though they didn't see blue as we do, they did see the energy relationships of the sky. Humph, you might say. I'm not really sure you've explained your theory. Perhaps not, but Ming and I are working on it. And for now, we can call it at least an analogy, if not a theory. And we hope you also might find it a helpful way of organizing your material experience in matters of perception and in matters of color. All right. And so I rest my case, or our case. We'll see what Ming says about what I just wrote earlier this afternoon.
Great.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts you want to present before we kind of open it up for discussion and Q&A again?
Yeah, I'll jump in with my version of how interpret the project Matt is proposing. So before we open to discussion, perhaps. So I'll share my screen. Okay, so yeah, so in many ways, I think the reason I got interested in this project is actually how we appreciate art, right? So why people enjoy making arts and why people enjoy looking at the arts. Right? So in general, our behavior. I'm a psychologist, not Shell. So we often say our mind is like it's like iceberg, right? So what's conscious is the tip of iceberg that's above water, and our behavior actually depends a lot on our subconscious, right? So what's below the waterline. So that's exactly how I think about this project, because we can only dimly appreciate what may have gone into. Sorry, let me move this around.
Yes, we go down under the water line and investigate and talk about, and we try to analyze, and we come up, but and that changes what's above the water, but there's much below the water we
don't understand.
We can only
right? But I see this is a good opportunity to think about what's below the waterline, and then if we could explain, if we try to get the sense of what's below the waterline, will be better. So I think we'll be better with understanding how artists make art and why we enjoy arts, right? So to think about much about our mental process below that waterline. And so I'm thinking, so like we discussed, our definition might be different of color. Right? So color from a scientific view is wavelength, right? It's wavelength of light, which reflects energy. So it's related to energy, but energy is different concept from scientific point of view and artist point of view. Color, the same way. Color from psychological view is how visual perception encodes a blooming boson of confusion. Right? So it's how we encode things. It's subjective in many sense. And from my understanding, from my conversation with Matt, I think color from many artists' point of view is how everything organizes and can be dynamically organized to tell everyone, self and others, how we feel joys and sorrows. So I think there are actually three layers of these dynamic relations when we see an art, right? So it's almost like a very intriguing three-body problem, right? So there are three bodies. There's first of all, because of a theory of mind, we have a synchronized connection between the observer and the artist, right? When observer look at art, look at a piece of art, they think what was the artist thinking when the artist made this painting, and also it's a synchronized connection between the observer and the art piece, right? So actually, why I say it's a three-body relations, because many of my art friends are saying if after the art piece is made, the art piece becomes alive, right? So it's kind of like writing a novel, right? Writing a novel. Towards the end, the author cannot decide how the characters in that novel will evolve, right? Because the novel got its own life. Right. A good art piece probably will get its own life. So it's also synchronized connection between the observer and the art piece, and the synchronized connection between the relationship between the observer and the art piece, and the relationship between the artist and art piece. So it's very intriguing, very complex three-body relations, whereas this three-body relations is so complicated, but there are some common principles they all need to follow, right? So we all live in a universe that's governed by the universal energy principle, and so I think the energy principle will be a way to go for us to understand how we organize, how we appreciate arts. So my version of the table of contents would be first, of course, we introduce the project, and then I'll describe, just like tonight, I described some principles of visual thinking, and it includes the dynamics of color, right? So even though most demonstrations I had is on a 2D static screen, but we see dynamics, right? We see implied motion, we see dynamics, and then we go into the theory part, right? So the energy probably act as an organization principles of how we see arts or how we make arts, and importantly, I'm hoping we'll have like a meat part. The fifth part of the book will be applications, examples in art and science. Like we hopefully we'll have many examples. We'll use a lot of artistic examples, describe why or what do we mean by the energy theory of color, and also some living examples, like even the birds, right? So this red spot of this bird, it's dynamic color, very, very dynamic color, and also the rocks here. It has potential energy, right? So
Mm.
it's static, but it has potential energy. It's a sculptural art piece. And some Matt already mentioned how we design products, packagings. Yeah, I think that'll be my version of of the project. Yeah, so let us know which one do you prefer better, and feel free to ask any other questions.
Great. Thank you guys so much. There are a couple questions in the chat, and I see it's right at 8 o'clock. So we'll just keep going. We'll take a couple questions and then we'll wrap up. So if everyone can stay, we'll keep addressing these. I know, Matt, you were messaging with someone a little bit in the chat. I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
Oh, there was a question about simultaneous contrast. I'm not sure. But I asked a little bit, and it's Luana, I think, who asked, she described if you put two very different hues, maybe they're well saturated colors next to each other, you get a sort of the experience of a visual vibration. You know, I would say that yes, you put contrasting colors. You're working if you're thinking about it in terms of the energies, you've got a dramatic contrast that's very exciting. That slide, Ming showed a slide of a flicker with a very bright red spot on the back of its head. And you notice in that red spot is surrounded by a lovely soft gray. That's very different than the kind of simultaneous contrast I think that Luna was describing. And I can remember when I was coming up with this energy theory of color idea, I was actually interested in some verbiage written by Vincent van Gogh and his Dear Theo about grays and how grays can lend a lovely aspect of color to a painting, because the grays give space to the colors. And part of my idea was if you separate the colors and you don't have them right up tight together, you get an effect maybe not unlike a stained glass window, where you can taste the energy differences with a little space between, and it's a little less vibrant. It's just all a business of tasting the energy relationship. Sometimes we enjoy that vibrant simultaneous contrast. The idea of the theory is not so much to say anything is one way or another. It's just the notion of an outlook or a lens or a tendency to look at it from the point of view of energy relationships. Well, there are some more questions.
There are, yeah. Kate James asks, are you going to set up experiments to study your theory?
We might have to.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we need to come up with more with some smart design. It's going to be hard because it's quite it involves many like thought experiments, because it's from some from I think it's from intuition. It origins from intuitions from how Matt was making his woodblock printing, and to study that with the experiments. It depends on what types of experiments, right? So Matt already have done some experimenting with when he creates his art, and he mentioned even when he decides how to paint his house, right? Matt, is that right? So you try to experimenting a little bit how you choose colors with this energy theory. So in some sense, yeah, we are already doing that. And some, if you are referring to scientific experiments, we have to perhaps think about some good design. It's not. I see it's a big project.
Yeah. Although ultimately, I mean, going back into Newton's optics helped me to realize science works a little like art. It's a way of describing our world. And so those ultimately, it's a thing of, when you said our brains are inference engines, it's a business of building a picture of what we think we are looking at. And we never will really know our world as it actually is. We're contained only in the the ability of our own perceptions.
Right.
So
Yeah.
in great part, I don't know, my own instinct, and I think Ming, I love the integration of science into I love the I guess the vibration between the mind of the scientist, yourself, Ming, and the mind of the artist. Watching my own mind, if there's something there. And there are a couple of questions. Here's one. Could they summarize their theory in a sentence or two? And I don't know. Can we? Sometimes I've thought it's just the idea that we live in a world that's really all about energy, and does it not make sense that our perceptions is involved in interacting with energy relationships? And so does it not make sense to address color and other dynamics with such an outlook? Would that be a way of describing it, Ming, in a sentence or two?
Yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress, right? So I think, yeah, it's we are also refining our description. So I think we kind of discussed. Eventually, we'll come with some more concrete description of the theory as actually perhaps even write a theory book, right? So right now, I think we are still at the stage of writing a guidebook, right? Yeah. So more on the application part, like how we could how we sometimes choose colors, how we use colors, or how we see colors.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I think we're just about to 10 after 8, so I think we can wrap up. And certainly if people have more questions or want to hear more from Matt, I'm sure you could reach out via email or on Matt's website to be in touch and hear more about this. But we'll certainly be staying tuned to see what comes next for you both. And
yes, we actually set up a little that we just started a little website where we can put you could find some of the examples and whatnot. energytheoryofcolor.com.
I'm going to stick it in the chat right now so folks can check that out if they like.
Yeah, I don't know that it'll get to be, overly impressive or comprehensive, but yes, there's the link of it, and we'll try to, we actually are scheduled to try this talk again 10 days from now or something. It's a Sunday evening. And we're going to keep working at it, and yeah, keep an eye on us. It's a wonderful conversation, we think, and we invite participation.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you guys so much. It's really been so much fun to hear about your ideas and see these examples. I know Kate's asking if people can contact you with questions and ideas. I think they can through your website. You have a contact form.
Yeah, we may not have a functional email on there yet, but we'll work on it. We'll try to get that together. And actually, we kind of hope that we'll have this little booklet, something tangible, printed out, maybe by middle of June or something like that. Mm-hmm. So that would be cool.
We'll keep an eye out, and we can let people know.
Keep an eye out on us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys again so much. Thanks for being here, and thanks everyone for coming and sticking around. I know it's late, so we'll let you go. And this talk is recorded, so hopefully we'll be able to share it with you guys to reference back and process some of the ideas that were presented.
Yeah,
Great.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you,
And
guys.
thank you very, very much, Ming.
Yeah,
Well
thank you.
done.
Right, thanks.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, all. Good night.
Good night.